Welcome back to another episode of At the Table with Susan and Lucy. Now, as many of you know, Lucy and I are co-chairs of a group called the American Italian Food Coalition, which is an organization of approximately 450 Italian food producers, companies, trade associations, wholesalers, all dedicated to making sure that sustainable, pure, and affordable Italian products are allowed and can get to American consumers with as much ease as possible. So that's what we're all about today. And a lot of times we spend our time talking about really important issues that have to do with things like the Mediterranean diet, learning lessons that we can learn from each other's countries. So nobody better than to join us today in that conversation than Dr. Paul Gately. He is a professor of exercise and obesity of Leeds Beckett University in Yorkshire, England, and CEO of MoreLife. Lucy and I have had the privilege of working with Dr. Gately before, earlier this year as a panelist for our Positive Nutrition Roundtable at the Embassy of Italy, and we are just delighted to have him join us at the table. The truth is, Dr. Gately, you know, as soon as you started speaking, not only because you have a great accent, but because of the words that came out of your mouth in terms of the way we need to start talking about nutrition, was just something that we knew as soon as we heard you speak that would be such a bonus to all of our viewers. So thank you again for joining us. We're delighted to have you, and we're looking to continuing to learn so much from you. So to get us started, I'm going to turn it over to Lucy.
Thank you, Susan. It's really good to see you again, Dr. Gately. Great to see you. I know that you are passionate about this subject of childhood obesity and obesity that crosses all ages. And your research on this issue is on par with the very best that we could have found to bring to the table this discussion. And I just want to tell our audience a little bit about you. You're the CEO of MoreLife, a subsidiary of Leeds Beckett University, which delivers specialist residential, community, and online weight loss programs. You've contributed to the International Obesity Task Force and World Health Organization's joint report on childhood obesity. And you've been a national spokesperson for Change for Life campaign led by the United Kingdom's Department of Health. You've worked with, for example, Disney and Sainsbury's and Tesco and Danone on their marketing and public health initiatives. And you've delivered more than 400 keynote presentations and scientific publications. So to our audience, we want you to know we are working with a true expert here. So tell us about your research. And I mean, to my mind, childhood obesity is an epidemic in the United States, probably elsewhere. So tell us about what you're doing and what your research is showing.
Well, firstly, thank you, Lucy and Susan, for this kind invitation. It was a delight to meet you in Washington several months ago, and I'm so happy to be chatting to you again today. I've been really lucky with my career. I've done a lot of great things, worked with a lot of great people, and I'm excited by this conversation. I guess my background is, it actually started in Massachusetts at a weight loss camp for children. When I was 18 years old, I came and worked for Camp America, and a program for the UK where we exchange students come to the US and US students come to the UK over the summer holidays. And I actually worked at a weight loss camp, one of the original weight loss camps in the US. And I was so passionate about it. I just got fascinated by the subject, and I decided to do my PhD work on there. And so I spent 8 years coming and going, spending my summers in the US, really enjoying US culture, traveling around the US. And then I go back to the UK and then do my studies on my PhD and go back with new ideas and so on and so forth. So this very action-orientated research program. Then I took on a job at the university in Leeds in the UK as an academic, and my career in childhood obesity continued to grow from there. And I was really interested in how do we help children living with obesity lead a healthy lifestyle? How do we help families? Because a lot of the culture when I first started the program in the US was very extreme diets, very extreme and regimented exercise program, very much a boot camp mentality, which in the first instance sounded great because these kids were losing lots of weight. But what was interesting was as I went back year on year, they'd lose the weight and regain it back. So it became a bit of a topic, and I got fascinated by that. But I also got fascinated by the families and the challenges that they were facing. It wasn't just they were overeating. It was trying to understand why are they overeating? What are the challenges these families are facing, and social challenges, mental health challenges, and just real genuine challenges in children, in families. Just fascinated me, and I found something that I could work with people on, enjoy, and really have a rewarding career. And I sort of look back 30 years on, and I'm so happy that I was sent effectively to this weight loss camp in Massachusetts, because it completely changed my life.
Wow.
Well, you say it completely changed your life, but it also changed your message, right? I mean, that's what Lucy and I found so fascinating at this roundtable. You referred to it like, we talk about it, not that it's a bad thing, but for years we've talked about restricted diet, a lot of exercise. And what has happened? Obesity rates have risen. So clearly we're doing something wrong. And you were talking more about, and I think what you're implying at least is when kids and adults, when we lose weight and we gain weight, it's not a lifestyle then, right? We're taking temporary habits and making them into habits, but then when they're no longer habits, we go back. So when we were listening to you at the roundtable, you explained a different approach that you want us all to take in this world in terms of not only putting into practice, but messaging, the way we talk about it, the way we educate people on it, that just diet and exercise is only getting us fatter. Can you expand on that a little bit here?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I suppose my experience has been, I'm a scientist, and whilst I think my colleagues have done an amazing job in helping us understand the real specifics about food and nutrition and nutrients, and about exercise and the components of exercise and energy and all those things, we've learned a lot. Science has taught us a lot. But I think what we've done is we've focused then too much on those little details. We've not looked at the humans that we're working with. We've not sort of said, okay, why are these children overeating? Is it just simply they don't understand? Is it because they've been facing some challenging circumstances at home? Have their family got some challenging circumstances? There's been a bereavement. Have they had a really close grandparent go through a challenging time, or they've moved apart? The disruption of that is absolutely significant to any young person. And so when you actually start to understand the mechanics of how humans live, what you then start to realize is we eat for a reason, and we are sedentary for a reason. So if we're not happy, we are much more likely to eat unhealthy food, and we're much less likely to be physically active. So the two behaviors we're trying to focus on, okay, but what are the factors that are driving that? And I think when we start to understand the factors that drive those two behaviors, we can then work with individuals. And that's why a lot of the diet and exercise messages have not landed, because families are saying, well, I'm trying to eat healthily, but I've got all these challenges I'm dealing with, and no one's helping with the challenges. Everyone's just wagging their finger saying, you must do this, or you're a bad parent. And I think, to me, I work with wonderful parents that absolutely cared for their children, but they had a 300-pound child. That wasn't bad parenting. Actually, when you unpick that, you've got some real family challenges. And when we worked with families and understood what their challenges were, we began to reshape their thinking and the environment and give them a real positive message about what they were doing and what they could do. And actually that a lot of what they were doing was really valiant efforts, but maybe guided in the wrong direction.
And you talked a lot about that at the roundtable. The other thing that almost all the speakers agreed upon, everybody agreed upon, was, and you just talked about it, the positive messaging versus the negative messaging. And I remember one of the speakers said, from the beginning of time, negative messages doesn't work. You can't eat the apple. So what do you want to do, Eve? I want that darn apple, right? I mean, it was so perfect. So, we spend all our time telling people what not to do, which only makes it, perhaps a little more tempting, if I should say. Can you just talk a little bit more about like the takeaways from that roundtable, and then we'll move on?
Yeah, the takeaway, what a great team that was, and what a great panel I was part of. And I think there was real consensus that if you put people on a diet, it works for a short period of time. Right. And different people will respond to different diets in different ways, but fundamentally they're all diets. The problem with most diets is people revert back to their old behaviors. And again, why do they revert back to their behaviors? Because, as you've rightly pointed out, Susan, that we are telling people what not to do. We're not giving them something to aim for. We're telling them you're bad and you're eating the wrong things. And I think it's about how do we create a more balanced message. And one of the fantastic elements from that work, that sort of couple of days, was the real focus on positive nutrition. How do we both recognize there are a huge, amazing number of positive nutrients out there, but how do we also embrace this positive message of food and enjoying food and recognizing food for what it is? I'm really lucky. I live in the UK. Our food culture is not great, but we're not very far from France, and we're not very far from Italy, and we're not very far from Spain, and they have real wonderful food cultures there. And what I've observed in my small environment of a part of Europe is, in the UK we don't see food as, we see food just as fuel. But when you go to Europe, you go to France, you go to Italy, food is more important than the culture. The quality of food is really important. The quality of nutrients is really important. And I guess that's been a fantastic learning for me, both personally and then bringing it back to my work to say, come on, there's some really lovely messages about food and culture and being together. But we can do that as part of a holistic, healthy lifestyle. And, and as we're all agreeing, I think that sort of don't do attitude is unhelpful, because it's restraining and constricting, and it's a bit depressing and miserable. Sure. I mean, food should be celebrated and embraced. Why do we have food at cultural events? Because it's a really important part about how we come together as human beings and social animals to enjoy time together and enjoy what our world has to offer for us. And that, to me, we've really challenged rather than embraced. And what we've got to do is embrace that, but create ways in which we can be more healthy, and positive messages and positive nutrition can be part of that.
Where were you when I was growing up? Thank you, Dr. Lucy.
I'm going to follow this thread a little longer, because I'm thinking about a mom or a dad, a family member watching us and saying, all right, we leave early in the morning to drive an hour to get to work. We don't get home until, 7 o'clock at night. Our kids are home alone in an apartment building, right? And honestly, this is the way I grew up. I grew up in very urban area. I was alone. My parents worked long hours, but my mother was so conscious of, the good things to eat and love. And so we always had, since I was alone and I was hungry and I was a teenager and I was really hungry. And I didn't necessarily have access to a lot of exercise programs, but I could enjoy eating when I came home from school. So even though we didn't have any money, we did have tomatoes, and we did have, olives, and we just had fun things that I could have my own little antipasto before they finally got home, right? And so I turn to you now and I say, if we just drill down and we talk to that family that you treat, right? And that your colleagues treat, and that you treat at a very fundamental level, what do you say to the parents about how they can help despite this enormous challenge they face, just trying to earn a living and get home at some decent?
I mean, Lucy, you paint a fantastic picture there of modern life and the challenges for parents, and therefore the challenges on young people, and therefore the challenges on our society. And I guess for me, the first thing that's most important in the work we do is every family's different, and trying to and I think we've had a world where we've tried to treat all families the same, and you're either good eaters or you're bad eaters, you're either active or you're inactive, and that's not the reality of most family life. So in our work, we would start to try and understand the family. What's the makeup of the family? Where are they? What's the time frames that they're around? What's the age of those children? Are they able to cook or prepare food for themselves? Does mum and dad get home late, or is there a guardian looking after them at different times in the day? So let's understand that, because once we understand the life of that family, we can then start to say, okay, here's some scenarios, and I'll give you a real lived experience of a child that we worked with that was gaining weight for about 4 or 5 years within his life, and he came to one of the programs we were working on, and he lost a lot of weight, and he went back to his home environment, and we were working with that family, and the child was starting to gain weight again, and we sort of, well, why is that the case? And and basically he was coming home around 3 p.m. from school. They lived in a bit of a rough neighborhood in London, so they didn't really want to let him play out. So he was at home, just as you described, Lucy. And what he was doing was he was snacking until dinner time with his parents, and then they would have the family meal, and then he'd go to bed a bit later. So two challenges here. One was that he was eating until 8 p.m. and then eating with his family at 8 p.m. But he was 11 years old. To me, 11 and eating at 8 p.m. is too late. So in terms of, that was one of the things we said to the parents, look, that's a bit late. Let's work out some scenarios. So what we decided to do with this family, long story short, but what we decided to do was get some ready-made meals for the family. Now, I can imagine there's lots of people out there saying, oh, no, that's terrible. It should be good, home-cooked Italian food should be, the meal of choice. And of course, we agree with that. That's perfection. But what we've got to deal with is realism. So this child was eating constantly after school until his dinner time. Whereas we got these ready-made meals for his microwave. They went in the microwave. Again, you'd argue that it's not the right thing to do, but it was right for that family. Mm-hmm. He ate dinner about 5 o'clock when he felt ready for his evening meal. We talked about the fact that he doesn't have to stretch his feeding until 8 o'clock. And then he didn't eat with his parents at 8 o'clock. Now, you could argue, again, not great, but what was it we were trying to achieve? We were trying to achieve what's the right solution for that family at that time. Actually, his weight started to come back down. He felt in control. His parents felt in control. There was no arguments around food. So it wasn't the ideal, perfect solution, but it was the right solution for that family. And I guess that's what I would urge families to do, is take a step back, not feel judged by society, but think, as a family, what's our lived experience and what may or may not be the ideas we can try? And trying is the right thing to do. There's no right or wrong. There is only effort in terms of trying different things. And what I genuinely believe and what we found is if families start to try different things and involve the child in that as well, or involve other children in the family, involve the whole family, in that process, it will be a much more positive experience for the whole family. And I would be very surprised if it's not the right solution for the family.
What I love about that, Doctor, and then Lucy, I'll let you finish up. You took pressure off the parents too.
Yeah.
Right. If I just know that my son is opposed to snacking throughout the time, that he's going to have a good meal that I'm going to prepare, and the pressure that I have, you are now taking pressure off me to say, okay, that's something I just don't have to worry about right now, which is just good for the overall emotional environment of living.
Completely.
Wow, I love that.
Yeah. Yes. And so I wanted to ask you something, though, about the Mediterranean diet, because, here at the American Italian Food Coalition, we're all about the health benefits of the Mediterranean diet. We could describe what it is. I'll let you dig down a little bit for us about the well-balanced meal that is. But we actually came across a New York Times article that in the Journal of Health, an article was published about the health benefits for women in fighting heart disease, right, with the Mediterranean diet, and that this study showed that there really are a lowering of risk of heart disease with the Mediterranean diet. Can you speak to that?
Yeah, sure. I mean, the evidence is really clear that there are a whole range of benefits. And again, we should focus on the positive sides of this, because I think that's what the Mediterranean diet teaches us. There's a huge number of positive nutrients within the Mediterranean diet. So I think that's one of the things to really outline. And it's rich in vegetables. It's rich in and in a variety of nutrients, particularly the types of saturated fats that we know are protective for heart disease. So when we sort of look at the Mediterranean diet, and if we look from a calorie perspective, there's not a massive difference, but there's a whole range of positive nutrients within the Mediterranean diet. Oily fish is a core component of that, which we know is associated with health benefits. Olive oil, which we know is associated with benefits. As I've talked about, fruits and vegetables, which we know, and all those things combined are really, really valuable to our health. And in a sense, that's for me, again, with our challenges and in terms of those cultures, because from young people that live around the Mediterranean, those sort of foods are just part of their diet. Whereas in the UK, it's really hard to sort of shift the needle on the consumption of the types of nutrients that the fruits, the vegetables, the oily fish. I'm battling with my children to sort of consume what those positive nutrients are. Whereas luckily for children that live around the sort of Mediterranean, it's just part of their culture. So I would add a cultural dimension to this too, and the value. I've referenced it before, the prominence of food and how quality food is really important and how the social aspects are important, but particularly the nutrients of the Mediterranean diet are really beneficial.
Well said. And another thing about our coalition is that we're all about access to food. And so, as Susan mentioned earlier, we're the spokespeople for hundreds of Italian food producers and companies that export good food to the United States. So, and I did want to call everybody's attention to our show. We have a show that's called Mangia Bene, where we, in fact, take wonderful recipes from all regions of Italy to show how the foods, like my region of Calabria and Susan's, where where peppers are a part of it, the menu. And so we're just very excited to share with people who watch the show the wonderful benefits of the Mediterranean diet, and also how great it is to try these different regions of Italy. So my last question to you is, do you have a favorite Italian food? Is there any Italy in your family or that takes you back?
I'm not that fortunate. I wish there was, and I wish I could, go and see my Italian family on a regular basis. I'm really lucky. One of my great friends lives. He lives just under Mont Blanc in France, but there's a really brilliant tunnel that takes us to the other side of the border into Italy. And about 3 weeks ago, I was very lucky to be skiing in a place called Courmayeur. And there is a restaurant on the mountain there that does the most delicious carbonara. I mean, yeah. And real, may not be the healthiest, but it is the most delicious of meals one could ever imagine. And again, that would be a go-to meal for me. It's absolutely beautiful. But everything around that, the sort of the breads, the sort of olives, the sort of tomatoes are just wonderful. And that sort of culture of sitting together with friends, enjoying real good quality food over a couple of hours, and then getting back onto the ski slope is for me my amazing dish and my also amazing experience.
Well, we knight you an Italian American.
Say that you're in the family.
Right, exactly. Now that you've been at the table, you can say, "Yeah, I am Italian."
Thank you.
Can I just ask one quick question on that, though, too? Because what we also talk about here at AFIC is with regard to trade, international cooperation, sort of breaking down borders. And what you've just talked about is an ability, if you're English, to be able to explore the countries around you and what their culture is. And the only way we can do that really is with effective trade. So that's what we've constantly been talking about, is sort of just, making sure that our states, our countries are as open to each other as possible, so that the benefits, the fruits, the vegetables can get to a place like the UK, and in some instances to the United States, where we can explore learnings. You are a perfect example, right? I mean, you crossed borders your entire life in order to be where you are today. So if you could just talk a little bit about why international cooperation is really kind of core. I know it sounds kind of crazy, but international cooperation, international trade is core of what we are discussing today.
I mean, I couldn't agree more, Susan. Actually, whilst my early career was in childhood obesity, I mean, I still focus my career in child obesity now, but a lot of what I do is engage with a variety of different stakeholders. And one of the unfortunate things that I believe is that we've demonized foods, lots and lots of foods. And what we've done is there's been a war between the food industry and the health professionals. And to me, it makes absolutely no sense. We're all serving, from a health or from a food perspective, the general population. And I think the sort of fighting that's been going on over the last decades around food and health, just to me makes no sense. Collaboration is by far, in my mind, the best way of achieving the goals of, a productive society, but also healthy individuals. And, and that is what I really believe. And I spend a lot more of my time now trying to create conversations between different stakeholders to realize where their place in the system is. The food industry has a responsibility on health, but it also can be a positive contributor if it's given the chance. We've talked a lot here about positive nutrients. We've talked a lot here about the wonderful Mediterranean diet. We've talked about importing, exporting, and crossing boundaries and borders. And so for me, that collaboration is a much more effective way of achieving a healthy population and a healthy global economy.
Thank you. Lucy?
Yes. Dr. Gately, it's just been a pleasure to be with you today. This has been one of the most educational, but also just fascinating discussions that we've had. We are just so grateful to you for being here with us, and want to compliment you on the work that you've done to improve, to work on obesity issues around the world. Thank you.
Yeah, I want to echo that. It's clear from anybody who's watching this what we saw in you, which is what has always been a negative conversation, a downer conversation about obesity and weight. You bring so much joy and optimism to the conversation. And without that, it's very hard to find the motivation as an individual or a family to move forward. So we feel really grateful that you took some time to allow us to introduce somebody like you with the positive attitude that you have to our viewers. So before we go, though, I do want to remind everyone to stay connected to the AIFC by following our Instagram, Twitter, both at AIF, the C as in coalition. Here, you can figure out how old I am because I'm loving this right now, at AIFC Coalition. And you can connect us also on LinkedIn. For more at the Table with Susan and Lucy, check out our website at www.aifccoalition.org.
You did great, Susan.
Thanks so much, Dr. Gately.
No, thank you so much. It's been a real honor to share some time with you both again.